Thank you for tuning in to Exeter TV. Exeter TV is the town's public and government access channels, available on Comcast Channels 6 and 22. Channel 6 is your channel. If you have an idea for a program, want to host your own talk show, or submit a film, we're here to get your content on television. On Channel 22, we bring you live and replay coverage of government meetings and other town updates. A third channel, Blue Hawk Media, is operated by SAU 16 and can be found on Channel 8, with all your school sports, events, and meetings. You can watch Exeter TV online at exeternh.tv, Apple TV, and on Roku. Find us on social media for extra content. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell to get notified about live streams and new content. Tune in to our platforms every other Friday to watch the Exeter Biweekly Report, with recaps of recent events, updates from town departments, and messages from nonprofits in your area. If you head to our website, exeternh.tv, we invite you to sign up to our newsletter to receive monthly updates about new content, upcoming meetings, and more. We'd like to thank you for taking the time to watch Exeter TV and hope that you tune in to our other content as well.
Good evening, and welcome to the Zoning Board of Adjustment meeting for Tuesday, April 21st, 2026. Good evening. My name is Bob Pryor. I'm the chair. And let me start by introducing the members that are here this evening. On my far left, Adam Carter. Next to him, Laura Montagno. To my immediate left, Laura Davies. To my immediate right, Martha Pennell. And to my far right, John Dal Santo. Laura Montagno and I voted last month, and you voted. So the three of us will, as voting members, will be voting this evening on the one application that we have. And Adam was here and did participate in the discussions last month. Adam, are you okay being a voting member?
I am.
Thank you. And between John and Martha, do you have a preference? I'd suggest arm wrestling, but Martha has a broken wrist. That wouldn't be fair.
She could hit me.
Martha, it's your decision. You're the senior member here.
All right, on seniority, how? Oh,
Martha Pennell will be the other voting member this evening.
thank you.
Very good.
John, thank you. John, you're welcome to participate in the discussions, the questioning, but we'll do, Martha will be voting at the end. Okay, the first item of business is a public hearing on the application of Phillips Exeter Academy for the property located at 3537 River Street, tax map parcel 72, lot 99, in the R2 Single Family Zoning District. And this is a special exception. Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. On behalf of Phillips Exeter Academy, my name is Eli Lano. I'm an attorney with Bernstein, Schur, and Manchester, joined at the desk tonight by Corey Belden of Altus Engineering. We also have Heather Taylor, the school's architect here, as well as Mark Layton, head of facilities, and Joanna is here as well from the school. I think, actually, as a matter of just record keeping, did you receive the McKeon report that was submitted? There was some question that maybe our appraisal report didn't.
We each have a copy, thank you, that we received this evening. I would imagine at an appropriate time, we'll each take a minute to read it.
It was a
That's not a-
2-page.
That's not a report.
No.
This is,
I don't know what that is.
It's basically item H, that's already in the application. There's nothing different on that that's not already in the original application. So I don't believe we did get the appraisal report.
So I submitted it to Dawn. She
the
confirmed.
complexity is that none of us have received our packets.
Okay.
The packets were mailed out almost 10 days ago.
Huh.
It's 2.5 miles for some of us, and none of us have received, John's 200 feet, and none of us have received our packets yet.
Okay.
So we are at a slight disadvantage. We will ask for you to perhaps read some of this
I was thinking
material.
that's probably our easiest answer is I
Some of
do
this
have it
material
on
to
my
us.
phone, which I don't like to do, but I will
That's
bring up my
fine.
phone
We
and
have,
read it to you. So,
we have received it by email.
okay.
No, not the appraisal.
Not the appraisal was not part of it, though.
Okay.
It was not part of the packet. And so this is signed by, it says, "See opinion of Mark H. McKeon, provided herewith." So it might be part of it? I'm not
So
sure.
we referenced it, and then it was, again, due to the short turnaround on getting this application in, it
Yep.
followed the application, so it should have been included in the packages.
It was
but-
not.
Okay.
It was not.
Again, I don't think that's necessarily a stopping point for us
If you would
tonight.
summarize it for us at the appropriate point,
Good.
that would be fine, Mr. Lano.
All right. So anyway, the board is certainly familiar with this property based on us being here in the middle of March to explain the bounds of this property, how it will be added. I know we have the benefit of a couple different members tonight. I'm sure you're also familiar with generally where this is in town. This is let's go to existing conditions. So this is a lot, you see the lot line here in blue is the existing lot line. We are adding this property, 3537 River, to the existing school property, and it abuts the school's tennis complex here, as you can see. Going to our prior application, which has no real bearing on this application, but for the fact that we did have a good discussion with the abutters, there was concern about what fit in the neighborhood and also basically what already exists in the neighborhood. So we had been proposing a 4-unit and now have, hopefully in the minds of the neighbors and in the board, right-sized this project to be 3 duplexes as opposed to 2 4-unit buildings. And additionally, by breaking it up like this, one of the concerns from Member Baum was that the property had an unbroken mass roof line of 126 feet, and that was a big concern that that was sort of the biggest architectural feature in the neighborhood. So now the largest roof span, the building width is 63 feet here. So a 50% reduction, which hopefully mitigates that concern. What we have here is a map showing any of the houses in yellow are single family, blue are 2-family residences or condos, purple are 3-family, and 4 is 4 or more units, as well as certain non-residential, and then also, as you know, this is school faculty housing over here at Phillips Exeter on O'Neill, et cetera, as well as across the street on Browns Court. So looking at that, obviously several of the criteria here relate to the current and existing neighborhood character. This shows that there is a mix. It's the R2 zone. A duplex is allowed by right as a special exception, meaning certain criteria that are laid out, and as we go through them specifically, several of them are strictly objective. Are you in a zone that allows this by special exception? Yes, that kind of question. And some of them are a little bit more subjective, but I think as an introduction, that's basically where we are, and I think it probably makes sense to go through the criteria unless the board has questions. I do have the elevation up on screen now. I think you've seen it's similar to what we were proposing, but obviously 50% of the width, 2 units as opposed to 4. Still going to be first-class design, first-class build on this site because it's important for the school, which is part of this community and has been for a long time, to be a good neighbor and good resident of Exeter. So with that in mind, the criteria, so A, that the use is a permitted special exception as set forth in Article 4.2, Schedule 1 hereof. This is again an objective question. Yes, duplex is allowed by special exception in this zone. B, that the use is so designed, located, and proposed to be operated that the public health, safety, welfare, and convenience will be protected. This again is where we took the comments from the abutters and board to heart, and there was the point that what we were proposing was potentially too large. Here, I think we've come, and the median size housing in this neighborhood, per one of the reports that was submitted to you, again, I don't know, have you seen this? Okay, so that the average, if you look at the average units per property in this neighborhood, is 2.1 units, as shown on that, this map, which again is some of it is a little bit further out of just maybe what the tight neighborhood, but I think it's a pretty good cross section of what you could consider the neighborhood broadly here, and breaks down to 2.1 units. And even if you get closer, you have the single families on River Road as well as the 3 families on River Street, and the 3 families on River Street Extension. You still come to a pretty similar breakdown of around 2 units.
Can I speak? Yes. Pardon me, my voice is, I'm losing my voice, but I just want to let you know that the way that this map was generated was by accessing the town's GIS information system. So checking on each property on the GIS system. And I know that there's potentially some properties, I know we had discussed with one of the people in attendance tonight, that 44 River Street, for example, which is listed as a two-unit building, is currently operating as just a single-family house. However, on the GIS site, it is listed as a multiple houses WF with finished garage and an apartment. So although there may be some minor discrepancies, these are what is listed. All of this data was obtained from the GIS site for each parcel, and that's how that information
Thank you. It could be that it's an accessory dwelling unit, which is still a single family.
Correct.
Sure. So again, in speaking to the public health, safety, welfare, and convenience here, we tried to match the existing residential character of the neighborhood in scale, density, and design. With regard to convenience, there were questions last time about the number of cars, et cetera, that would be using these streets as they are existing, and not overly wide, et cetera, not grand thoroughfares here in Exeter. But each, same as previously proposed, each will have an indoor parking space in the garage as well as room on the driveway. So we're required by law now to have one parking space. Each will have two for the convenience of the neighborhood, ability to be off the street, et cetera. I think that fits in well with the neighborhood character. And we have adequate spacing and some of the things that you know and we know will be discussed at planning board, but things like snow storage, et cetera, we don't have concerns about having adequate area on site to place those. Again, with regard to convenience on a road that is not overly broad and overly blessed with extra space. I know there were some questions about where people turn around, et cetera, on River Street. Here, one thing that happens is that, well, that last driveway that one of the private residences has was used as a turnaround. Here, I would imagine that by adding a couple more driveways on that street, there's an opportunity that people won't turn around in that driveway. They'll turn around on the Phillips Exeter driveways. I think that's sort of maybe a small comfort, but it is still something regarding neighborhood convenience. Again, not expected to have more noise, light, any of those things that could be inconveniences. Obviously, during construction, we will have a construction plan to maintain runoff and site stability, things of that, reasonable business construction hours, so that even for that short duration, hopefully the inconvenience is not too great as we work towards that. So, again, with regard to criteria B, designed for proposed to be located, operated, et cetera, with the public health, safety, welfare, and convenience being protected, I think we meet that criteria. C, that the proposed use will be compatible with the zone district and adjoining post-1972 development where it is located. Again, not to beat the same drum, I think the map that shows basically what is existent in this zone, what we heard last time, that this is not a zone for 4 families, so we've knocked it down to these 2 families. We've reduced from 8 to 6 units. I think we really have taken to mind what the abutters and what the board members said here. So most of this is developed in that post-72 situation. There's not too many new buildings newer than that on this, but again, designed to fit in with what's there and what can be there, what will be there, et cetera, with regard to the zoning. D, that adequate landscaping and screening are provided. This has been a question by abutters at the last hearing, and there are some stands of trees, pine trees, that will remain. And then due to any development, you have to have some situations where tree roots get damaged and you just can't save all the trees, unfortunately. So we will see during planning what is necessary in terms of what can be maintained and what, if anything, needs to be replaced to provide that adequate screening. But again, the character of the neighborhood is not, it's sort of an older downtown neighborhood where the houses are relatively close together, but you still do have well-maintained yards and flowers and things, et cetera. But it's not that these are an acre of woodland buffer between the neighborhoods existing. So I don't think that would be expected as a necessity of this development. That adequate this is E, that adequate off-street parking and loading are provided, and ingress and egress are so designed as to cause minimum interference with traffic on abutting streets. Again, RSA 674-16-7 was passed last summer, reducing the unit requirement across the state to 1 car per unit. Not here to debate the merits of the legislature's choice on that, but we'll note that we provided 2 spaces minimum per unit here, so we've doubled what's required by law. So I think that objectively we meet that piece with regard to parking. And then ingress and egress, these are lots. This is a lot at the end of 2 dead-end streets with Browns Court and River Street. There should be no issue in terms of backing onto the street and pulling in when you come down at the end of the workday or whatever the case may be. Corey, do you have any engineering additions to add with regard to egress, ingress? I mean, there's not a whole lot. It's not a situation with site circulation, et cetera, because nobody was driving through the middle of the site.
Those, as mentioned, these are two dead-end streets that will continue to function as they are with the, two more driveways on them.
Criterion F, that the use conforms with all applicable regulations governing the district where located, except as may otherwise be determined for large-scale developments. The second piece of that sentence I don't think is applicable. This is not really a large-scale development by any stretch of the definition there. And I think the best way to show that we conform with the applicable regulations is, again, criterion A is that this is a use allowed by special exception, so we are in that piece of it, and no further variance, relief, or waivers are being requested on this site. So I think that shows general conformity, but for the need to meet the special exception criteria as set forth in the ordinance. G, as a condition of special exception approval, the applicant may be required to obtain town planner review and or planning board approval of the site plan. We acknowledge that we will be required to go for site plan review on this project. Mm-hmm. I don't know that there is anything beyond that response necessary to meet this criterion. That the use shall not adversely affect abutting or nearby property values. If you'll forgive me for grabbing my phone, I have the McKeon report. Oh, great, thank you. Thank you, Mark. So again, this is dated, and it was submitted early last week to your packages through the town staff. April 13th, this is by M.H. McKeon Appraisal Services, Inc., and Phillips Exeter Academy, property address 3537 River Street. Dear Attorney Leno, in accordance with your request, I have reviewed the proposed plan you sent me for the property known by the town of Exeter, New Hampshire as street address 3537. Property consists of 0.36 acres of vacant land. It's in the R2 zone, which allows two-family dwellings by special exception. Road frontage on River Street, as well as Brown's Court, owned by the Academy. Sorry, try to keep this moving in terms of preamble. You have asked me to consider whether construction of the proposed project would have any negative impact on the property values of single-family residences that either abut or are in close proximity to the proposed development. This is a consulting assignment. The intended use of this report is to provide information to the client relative to the application for variances or special exceptions in the effort to receive approval from the town. The intended users of this report are the owners, the town, me, and the zoning board. I have visited the subject site and driven through the neighborhood and viewed the homes. The properties appear to be well maintained. They are a mix of 1, 2, and 3 family residences. In order to provide an opinion relative to the possible impact the proposed project might have on the values of surrounding properties, I researched sales of single-family homes in the subject's immediate neighborhood, which have 2 or 3 unit properties near them. I then reviewed sales of similar homes in other Exeter neighborhoods that are also in close proximity to small multifamily properties. I found 2 sales of single-family residences in the immediate area that sold relatively recently. 31 River Street is a single-family residence that sold for $625,000 on June 10, 2024. It was on the market for 7 days and sold at the list price. Home was built in 1870, bedroom count, etc. The home is adjacent to 3 family homes and diagonally across the street from a 2-family residence. 22 River Street is a single-family residence that sold for $590,000 on 8/20/2025. It was on the market for 9 days and sold for $10,000 under the list price of $600,000. This home was built in 1920, has 5 rooms, 3 bedrooms. The home is next door to a 2-family home and diagonally across the street from a 3-family residence. Also researched other neighborhoods. I found that they were consistent with the sales in the subject's immediate neighborhood. In conclusion, the question at hand is whether the construction of the 3 proposed 2-family properties will have any negative impact on the values of other residential properties in the area. As I have noted, within the immediate neighborhood, there are already several 2- and 3-unit properties. Based on my 38 years of experience as a residential appraiser in southern New Hampshire, coupled with my education and training and the research cited above, it is my opinion that the proposed construction of 3 duplex-style homes located at 35/37 River Street, Exeter, New Hampshire, will not diminish the values of surrounding residential properties. Respectfully submitted, Mark McKeon.
Thanks for reading that to us.
Yeah, I think it's important to have it in the record. Again, I don't know that I have anything else to add with regard to criterion H.
Okay.
That the application is for a special exception. If the application is for a special exception for hazardous storage of material, again, this is not applicable. It's not for that. And J, for use on any of the following properties, we're not any of those properties, so
Right.
that's not applicable either. So again, with the mix of the criteria before you, several of them are objectively met. A, for example, we are in a zone where it's allowed by special exception. And I think the subjective criteria, we thought hard about this. We've been paying attention to this property for a while, as evidenced by the variance request previously, and took feedback well here, that too broad a building, a little too much, and instead, rather than asking for variance, which is meant to be a harder standard, came back for something that's allowed by special exception, which is meant to be an easier standard, providing certain criteria are met. So I believe we meet the criteria for the special exception tonight, and would be happy to answer any questions the board has, and hope you agree.
Thank you very much, Mr. Leno. I have a question. I'm not sure which of you is going to answer this. There's no way my eyes are going to read this, the numbers up here, so you're going to have to help me with this. The lot coverage, could you tell me what the lot coverage is now as opposed to the original application that was submitted last month? I'm assuming it's on here. I just can't read it.
Correct. Well, so my name is Corey Belden, again with Office Engineering. If we can go back. When we're looking at the site, as we discussed at the previous meeting, and this project is a proposal to merge the .35
Right.
acre lot into the larger lot. So when we're talking about lot coverage for the site, we're talking...
Perhaps I should have been clearer. We're
talking about lot coverage.
The buildings themselves, what's the delta between last and this? I perhaps used the wrong term.
Oh, it would be,
So the 2 buildings proposed last time were X square feet, and the 3 this time is?
right, it would be a 25% reduction because we've basically removed 2 of the units, so it's 60,
Yeah, it's just, we split from 126.
63 by times 40.
So you just took one of the buildings and cut it in 2?
We
Yep.
took the 4 buildings, we split them into instead of having 4-unit buildings, we split them
Right.
into duplexes.
3.
Split them apart and have 3 duplexes. So
Okay.
it would be
So it's
really
20
the
it's-
base floor plan.
25% reduction.
Okay, fine.
25%.
So the buildings are roughly the same size, they're just positioned
Well,
differently?
half the size of what we previously, the units are the
Right.
same size, and then.
But the total would be exactly 3/4 of what was proposed last time. Thank
Correct,
you.
and
That's-
again,
That's what I just, yeah, that's
By
good.
staggering these 2 buildings, as you see, one's a little bit closer to the street. The goal there was to meet Member Baum's concern that there's just that straight massing line. So this adds a little bit of visual distinction by having one a little bit further set back.
Okay. Other members of the board have questions for the applicant, please?
Yeah, I was wondering, on the parking, you noted that 2 spaces per unit. Does that include the garage?
Yes.
That does
Yes.
include the
Yes.
garage. Okay, I just want to clarify that.
So 1 driveway, 1 garage per unit?
Yeah, and I think, because they're about 20-foot driveway.
Correct. We've
So-
set them 20 feet from the property line. There's more space, but that with it on-site, within the property, there's 20 feet of there. So there's parking between the driveway and the parking garage.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Correct.
Yeah, which fits about a standard size space, which is somewhere between 9 by 18 to 10 by 20, depending on which town's read.
Other questions for the applicant?
Could you go to the front front elevation, please?
Sorry, which one?
The front elevation, please?
Oops, sorry. There we go.
Okay. So each unit has its own driveway with its own garage door. So there's 4 new driveways on River and 2 new driveways on Browns.
Correct.
Okay. And this,
Sorry.
oh, that's okay.
The height remains the same from last time. It's just the length of it. Okay.
And this turnaround at the end, or near the end of River Street, is going to be a gravel turnaround. Is that going to be maintained by?
So that was, we added that to the plan to address the concern from the neighbors that they were using their driveway for a turnaround. So we had discussed we could construct a small turnaround area at the end of River Street to allow people to utilize that for turnaround if they come down to the end of the road. We can discuss that a bit more during planning board review, how we would situate that, but that's what the intent of that was to create a small turnaround, not for fire trucks, but for, a standard vehicle to be able to turn around.
Okay.
Do you have that on a drawing that we can look at?
It was on the site plan,
This right here.
I know, I didn't print it
and it
off.
was right
So what
there,
about,
right at the end of the street, yeah.
so what about for the other street? Because it's equally as tight on that side, if not tighter.
Again, part of the reason for including that was that one of the neighbors said that if people went to the wrong street, were looking for the schools, fields, et cetera, they turn around in his driveway. Again, so if they turn around in one of our driveways, additionally, we own the house across the street as well. I guess I don't know how often this actually happens. We were trying to do a favor based on that's not fair. We were trying to remediate a concern.
It was our understanding that, I think maybe the abutter could speak to it, that because the tennis courts are right there at the end of River Street, people using their
GPS
Google Maps or
mistakes, et cetera.
GPS oftentimes come down River Street thinking they're going to be able to access the tennis courts when that's not the access point to the tennis courts. I don't believe that's the same concern on Brown's Court, but,
The building on the left that faces Brown's Court, emerging from its lower left-hand corner are 2 dotted lines that run down. What do those represent? Are those setbacks?
correct, those are, we were showing the 20 and the 25-foot setback lines on that property. The red line is the 15-foot setback, the middle dark line is the 20 and then 25. So
Thank
we
you.
were showing our buildings at 20-foot
Yeah.
setback.
Got it. Thank you very much. Other questions for the applicant at this time?
I have one. In reference to neighborhoods, we don't have a definition that I could find in the handbook. How do you typically define a neighborhood?
So I can answer this if you want. So in this, the way that, let me go back to the neighborhood plan. So the way that this neighborhood, or that we defined the neighborhood, again, people can use different definitions, but utilizing the C1 zoning district, which is this line up here, that all of this area is the residential R2 zoning district. So utilizing the northern boundary as this commercial district, really the southern and western boundary as Phillips Exeter Academy, and then the Exeter River, this area was what we considered the quote neighborhood that was analyzed for the neighborhood plan. We felt that that was a good representation, same zoning district, same all in proximity to each other and surrounded by certain features.
Thank you.
All set?
I'm all set. Thanks.
Okay. I have a question for staff, if you don't mind. The fact that this is 3 3 separate buildings totaling 6 residences still qualifies for special exception?
Yes.
Okay.
My opinion.
Okay, thank you. Other questions for the applicant? I think we'll move to public opinion now, if you don't mind. Public comment period, which could last a while or could be short. We'll see. Possible. And then you'll have the opportunity to reply to any comments that are made during the public session.
Can we stay here, or?
I would let the public come up here if you don't mind.
Very good.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So at this time, we're going to open it up for public opinion. There was a longish document that unfortunately has only today been received, or when we arrived at the meeting this evening. So this is essentially a document that has been signed by does anyone want to speak on behalf of this? Please.
I believe it was dropped off.
Well, hang on. Everybody who's speaking, you need to be at the microphone and who you are and where you live.
Do you have additional copies of that?
I do have one, yes, sir. There's 2 right here. You're welcome to. There's 2 of these right here. Thank you. Yep, got it. Please.
Catherine Forbes Fisher, 36.
Why don't you move that? There we go. Perfect.
Catherine Forbes Fisher, 36 River Street.
It's for our television audience. Don't you know we have one of those?
Fortunately, I do.
Don't laugh. We do. We have a TV audience. There's 3 lonely people out there watching it, I'm sure. Oh, sorry, that was rude. Yikes, did I say that?
So I'm sorry you didn't receive it. I believe it was dropped off on Monday, so I'm sorry you didn't receive it before now.
That's all right. That's all right. Would you just summarize this for us?
Yes, so that was our response. So those of us on River Street especially do not see how this addresses really any of the concerns that we raised, which really had nothing to do with the roof line, although I understand that was a concern raised. And so we went through it point by point and described that. I do have a statement I wanted to add to that. I don't know if do we need to read that, or?
No, but we might need to take time to read it at some point.
Okay.
Make sure that we go through it in some detail. What would you like to add to it?
So what I'd like to say is, so I've already introduced myself. So Joe and I, my husband and I, have lived on River Street for over 44 years. We have long-standing ties with the neighborhood, the community at large, including Phillips Exeter. In fact, we moved to Exeter in 1981, straight out of social work graduate school, because Joe accepted a job at Phillips Exeter, and I joined a small private practice here. We lived in faculty housing until we could afford to purchase our first home, which is still our current home, thank you, on River Street. At the time, the house could have generously been referred to as a fixer-upper, and the street could have generously been referred to as an up-and-coming street. It's changed considerably since that time. We, at least I, expected this was going to be our starter home before we could afford to move to a better location in a better neighborhood. On the other hand, my husband, he had a clear vision. He knew it was a diamond in the rough and that it would shine with a lot of hard work, investment, and patient, loving care. And as much as I hate to admit it, he was right. Over the years, we've been the lucky beneficiaries of the many blessings this neighborhood, the larger community, and our association with Phillips Exeter had to offer, including the many personal relationships and friendships we formed with staff and faculty families over the years. One of the friendships we are fortunate to have made and kept is with our former neighbor and former head of facilities at PEA, Roger Wakeman, who purchased the property at 44 River Street that the Locks now own. So during his tenure at PEA, Roger was the person who helped facilitate the purchase of this property that's under consideration right now. And he had a plan at that time that he thought was reasonable as a representative of PEA and as a resident of Exeter and as a member of as a resident on River Street, that he thought was reasonable and appropriate, which was to build 2 single-family homes, one facing River Street, one facing Browns Court. That didn't happen. I'm not sure why, but it didn't. So here we are. So even though I originally expected our home would be our starter home, Over time, I came to realize the benefits and blessings of living on this safe, quiet, dead-end street on the river. So we invested our time and our sweat and our money into improving our property and making it an even more special place. The neighborhood has undergone many changes, as most neighborhoods have over time, but for the most part, as older residents or their heirs sold their homes, new people moved in, and they improved those properties, renovating and adding on to existing structures. With all of these changes, I am not aware of any construction that involved turning a single-family home into a duplex or a duplex into a multifamily home. In fact, the opposite occurred. I understand that residential uses exist in this area, but this proposal for 6 units with a total of 18 bedrooms represents a very different level of intensity and significant increase in occupancy, vehicles, and overall activity than the 2,000 square foot single duplex with 2-bedroom units, a total of 4 bedrooms, that previously existed. I don't know if any of you have seen the property that previously existed. I have a picture of it here if anyone is interested. But in any case,
It no longer exists.
it no longer exists. But that was what was there before. So this increase is especially important because this portion of River Street is a dead end. And while the applicants refer to the neighborhood, and I'm glad you asked that question about neighborhood because I think it's important, they refer to it as including River Street Extension, Browns Court. A dead-end street functions as a smaller pocket within the larger neighborhood. And the homes at the end of this street, our end of the street, experience conditions very different from those around the corner on River Street Extension or even at the other end of River Street. They have access to getting, to going out, straight out. We don't. On a dead-end street, all traffic must come in, travel the same stretch, and either they turn around or they back up to get out. That means all of the activity from this proposal, the cars, the deliveries, the visitors, will be concentrated directly on the front of the same small group of single-family homes located within the dead end of the River Street, between River Street the end and River Street Extension. That level of concentrated activity directly affects the character of this quiet residential area where children can play, where neighbors walk, where residents regularly back out of driveways. And I'm glad you mentioned the number of driveways because we regularly have to back out of driveways onto the same small section of the street. The increase in the number of vehicles, trips, daily activity, and noise can be expected to change how the street functions. It raises concerns about safety, particularly for children and pedestrians, and makes routine activities like backing out of a driveway more difficult and less predictable. What is now a small, contained residential pocket would begin to function more like a higher density area without the infrastructure or street design to support that level of use. I'm also concerned that the proposal relies on a parcel merger to justify a level of density that wouldn't otherwise be permitted on this site. From the perspective of those of us living here, the impact is experienced where the development is actually located on River Street, not across a larger parcel, which is that larger 50-plus acres. The appraisal submitted in support of the application does not reflect those conditions. It compares homes that are near small multifamily properties, not the ones located directly adjacent to the development of this scale at the end of a dead-end street, and therefore it doesn't capture the same concentrated impact. For these reasons, I ask that the board deny the application. If the board is inclined to approve, I would ask that the basis of how density is being applied through parcel merger be clearly stated on the record, and I would also request a continuance. Despite repeated requests, the appraisal referenced in the application wasn't made available to us until yesterday, and we've encountered difficulty encountered conflicts trying to retain counsel. So additional time would allow for a more complete and informed response on our part.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Would anyone else like to please.
Good evening. Joe Fisher, 36 River Street, loving husband of Catherine. A couple of things to clarify. The turnaround at the end of River Street will evaporate 6 months out of the year because when they plow River Street, they put the snow at the end of River Street. There won't be no turnaround, especially under the conditions like we had this year. That amount of snow came way out, practically coming close to the locked driveway. One of the statements that was made was that these buildings would shield us from the athletic complex.
From what complex?
The athletic complex. There was a general statement about the athletic fields or what were there. The only thing that is there are tennis courts. Everybody on River Street, we never hear or see really anybody there. It's not a disturbance. It's just in the background, 100%. The thing about River Street as a way in which people come to not the tennis courts. I never said that. What I said was that 12 months out of the year, there are things going on athletically at the academy. If it's not outdoors with soccer, football, cross country, etc., it's hockey, basketball, or baseball, lacrosse, or track. And people come down that road every single, Monday through Saturday, and sometimes on Sunday, because they're looking for the athletic complex. And they make a left on River Street extension and a right on River Street. They come to the end of the road when there are tennis courts there. They turn around in the locked driveway and go out. So it's a year-round phenomenon. It's just not people looking for the tennis courts or to be a spectator for tennis matches. It's really a year-round phenomenon of driving down. And what usually happens, the car comes down, they get 3/4 of the way, realize it's a dead-end street, and they're not getting to the athletic complex. They turn around in a locked driveway, and then they speed up as fast as they can, because they're probably late for a game, out River Street, left onto River Street extension, left onto Court Street. So just wanted to clarify those few things about what have been said in the presentation in the past.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate it.
Anyone else?
I'm Steve Locke, 44 River Street, the blue at the end. My main concern is when I look at these future faculty housing for Phillips Exeter, whereas I understand they've been a dorm or within the dorms for 10 years. They're probably married, they're going to have kids, so that the average age of the street will go down significantly. But I look at the 4 units, 4 driveways they're bringing out onto River Street, and that's not much different than their previous proposal. But when I look at those 4, and I look at the O'Neill Court up there, and having driven through, they provide sidewalks. And there are no sidewalks on this street. So that it comes down to a question of safety, in my opinion. And I think that needs to be put into perspective.
Are there any sidewalks in this area? River Street Extension, Browns Court? No.
There are some on where South Street turns into River Street Extension.
Okay.
But that's all. And certainly the single unit at the end of those 4 they've landscaped as though there is not going to be a sidewalk.
I'm sorry, what building are you referring to? The building at the end of Browns Court?
No, the building in yellow at the end of the 4 units on River Street. I'm not sure what number that is.
You have the pointer in front of you.
Which building are you discussing?
I think the yellow next to ours.
This building right here,
That's number 22?
22. It is close to the road,
Yeah, it's very close to the road.
and so that's going to be a problem because a sidewalk needs to go there for the,
I don't think sidewalks are realistic, given the width of the road.
well, also with the snow, there was no room for a sidewalk anywhere.
Okay. Thank you very much. That was me who was turning around, who was backing, when you were backing out, that was me behind you.
Well, thank you.
In case you were
for
trying to
waiting
figure
for
out
me
who
to
that
get
was.
out.
It was sort of a standoff. Who was going to back up first, you or me? That was me.
Well, the thought did go through, maybe if I held off and kept you there, we wouldn't have the meeting.
I said the meeting can't start without me, so we'd have been waiting. Would anyone else like to address us?
Yes, please. I'm David Wold at 22 River Street.
How do you spell your last name, David?
WOLD.
Thank you very much. So
I
that
think-
is your house that we were just talking about?
I think we're the second newest arrivals on River Street.
Excuse me, David, he thinks it's 22. That's numbered not as the street.
31 is the yellow one.
31 is this gentleman's house that we were just talking about. 22 is
Which house is yours?
22 River Street.
Thank you.
Which
I got
think
that.
is labeled as 22.
That's not the one he's talking about.
So, anyway,
Is 22 up at the end of River Street?
it's right at the end of River
Yeah,
Street
okay.
extension. I have a question for...
That house right there.
Correct.
Thank you.
I have a question for the board. Can you explain what qualifies as a special exception and where, is there any sort of super special exception? Because I understand that there's,
Thank heavens, no.
like, what is it, double secret probation?
Right.
I understand there's a special exception for two-family homes in that zone. This is 3 two-family homes.
Which is why I asked the question that I did. of
Okay,
the-
I may have missed it en route. I was
Right.
watching and then arrived in person.
A special exception is simply, there are things that are permitted based on what zone it is. I'm not going to go through the entire
Right.
zoning book. There are things that are permitted. There are certain uses that are permitted. Some of them are permitted by right. They say, oh, you want a single-family home? Fine, you can build that.
Right.
There are other things that are by special exception, which means you have to meet certain criteria, A through H in this case, that are
Yeah.
listed out. And there are others that you can't do it in this zone. That's where you ask for a variance.
Right.
Okay? Last time we had a variance request. That was withdrawn.
Right.
Right? This time, staff feels, and we have not discussed, but we feel that it probably does meet the criteria for a special exception.
Okay, so just so I understand, because what I understand it reads as is you can build a two-family in that neighborhood. So it doesn't matter whether you're building multiple two-families on that.
That's why I asked the
on that
question that I
particular
did.
lot.
Staff has assured me,
Okay.
and we will discuss it, that multiple, I had the same question. Are multiple two families allowed? And staff assures me that it is.
Yeah.
But we will be discussing that further.
Just to provide some input from people who live in that area, I think if you asked us, we'd say the buffer between us and the athletic complex is pretty nice as it is. I don't think anyone on the street says, you know, it'd be really nice in place of this really beautiful stand of trees is some big duplexes. So I think to suggest that that is somehow improving the buffer for the residents, to my understanding and talking to all the residents of the area, that is not the case. We would much prefer to have that be a green space as it is. And I happened to walk off the other day the size of those new duplexes, and you'll notice the blue house next to mine is a duplex, right? And you can see, even from this map, the difference in scale. So it's about half as wide as one of the duplexes there. So one of the things that I would like to raise as a point is that not all duplexes are created equal, perhaps.
Of course.
And one of the objections last time was, I think it was, if I'm not mistaken, 129 feet wide, the fourplex. My understanding is these are 63 feet wide, which means we're at 126 feet. So all we've gained is about 3 feet. Now, we've got a 15-foot view in between those buildings, but I think you'd agree that once you get at any kind of an angle, it's going to be 126 feet of facade. And so it seems to me that all that's really happened here is that it's been reduced by 2. Now we have 4 driveways spilling onto a street that, if you've spent any time there, gets very cumbersome for delivery trucks and snow plows and other large vehicles. And now that traffic's going to increase with 4 more residences at the end of the street. I happen to have a really good vantage point of the plows that go down there. And the experience they have, I don't know if they weigh in on these sorts of things, but watching them do River Street Extension versus River Street takes them about 4 times as long because they can't drive through the way they do on River Street Extension.
Dead ends are dead ends.
So it becomes quite cumbersome for them to plow down there, and leaves quite a significant, as others have said, pile of snow at the end of the street.
The addition of these buildings will not change the nature of the street itself in terms of plowing.
True.
They're still going to have to plow the same square footage.
True.
And so that really doesn't change anything.
True.
Right.
It just means that all the ancillary traffic related to
that
delivery trucks and other things will increase the traffic on that street potentially.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to also suggest that I'm a little confused by the appraisal, which to my mind, all it did was look at recent sales. Isn't the fundamental question whether the people who live across the street from that space now will see a lower return if they were to sell? In other words,
I'm turning to my colleague, the appraiser.
Okay.
So the typical way you would measure something like whether or not a property or a development would impact property values is to look at similar properties that have sold and determine if they've sold at the market value, if there were no influence, versus what they sold for with that influence. And that is what he tried to do. Again, I have not seen it. I understand he looked at several comparables. It seems like he gave it some good thought. He's a reputable appraiser that I'm familiar with, which is nice because sometimes we don't always get that. So,
but all it did really was say these houses sold, and
it
they
is
happen
impossible to know exactly what the impact of anything is going to be.
Correct, but one would think that you might consider whether, for example, Brandon's house right next to that complex, whether it would be worth the same once that's built as it was worth.
And how does one consider that?
I'm saying that it's not completely objective, but it certainly has to be a consideration, because then to suggest that just because I bought my house at X and it happens to sit next to a duplex means that won't have any impact on the value of my home. To say to the Locks and to the Fishers that their properties across the street will not lose any value is nonsensical. And so I understand there is no way to particularly judge that, but you do have to make some judgment because it's in there as one of the criteria.
Yes, it is.
So to say that it's a function of, well, this sold because, and it sold within a certain amount of time.
You're placing more credibility on that report necessarily than we are. What I'm looking at is the comment that you're making and saying that, frankly, I think that an empty lot is great, but it's naive to believe that an empty lot is going to stay an empty lot. There was a building on there. There will be another building on there. There may be multiple buildings on there.
Sure, of course.
And is that necessarily going to reduce the value of abutting properties? I don't know. I mean, these are brand-new buildings that history has shown will be well-built and well-maintained. So I don't want to over-focus on strictly this one thing. And I'm not attacking you, but I'm just saying I just don't necessarily believe that the existence of buildings is going to guaranteed, as you're implying, that's going to reduce the value of abutting properties. I don't think that's necessarily the case.
I would argue, however, that the people who might have the best sense of that are the people who live there. And
do have a slightly vested interest in the outcome.
Of course, and that's one of the reasons why I think, should take into account their points of view.
Absolutely.
And one of the concerns people in the community have is that we don't have the resources that a Phillips Exeter does. We don't have the relationship with the town as an entity that they have.
Yes, you do. You're a taxpayer.
You'd be surprised how many taxpayers...
I'm assuming you're a taxpayer.
You'd be surprised how many taxpayers have said to me they get what they want. So it becomes a little bit daunting for those of us who are just individual homeowners to have them represented by an attorney and to have several weeks of your time with their proposal, and we don't get it until late in the game. You don't get that appraisal letter or our letter until the day before because we don't have time to respond. So I hope you'll forgive me for saying, as the single homeowner kind of person who lives on the street, it doesn't feel like it's necessarily equally in balance. And I would say one of the reasons that the people on the street are out in force is because there's concern about whether they're going to receive the same value for their home that they might have otherwise. And I think everyone's understanding was, based on what was there and what has been zoned, that it would turn into a 6-unit development of 63-foot wide homes. And so I hope you'll forgive me. I don't mean to sound aggressive, but we're trying to protect our interests as residents of the street. And I can tell you that two things. One, yes, I bought next to a 2-family that's half as wide as the one that's being suggested, and they're putting them side by side. I don't think that's an apples to apples comparison. And I would suggest that Brendan probably would have looked at his house differently had there been those size buildings next to them. And so that is, in my mind, something that I would hope the board would consider carefully. And that we have an opportunity to address any of the questions that you have for us, because unfortunately our paperwork didn't get to you until now, and so you haven't had any opportunity to read it. So you don't have any opportunity to ask us questions about what we're suggesting, even though you had time to be prepared to ask Phillips Exeter questions about their proposal.
We do appreciate every single member of the public who comes out. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Who wants to follow that?
Just one quick question.
Shall we let somebody else speak first?
No, go ahead. It's all fine. It's good.
It's okay?
Yep, go right ahead.
Just a question about for the appraiser on
Sure.
your panel. So when you're appraising, do you take into account density, so the issue of density that we've been talking about? So if a property has, if we have a single family across the street, or we have a duplex across the street, versus we're increasing the amount of traffic coming directly onto the road in this very small space.
Okay. So ideally, what I was starting to say was the methodology. The ideal methodology would be to look at comparables that sold next to single-family homes and similar comparables that sold next to multifamily homes, and see if there's any indication in the difference. I could not tell from the oral summary if that was done, but I didn't think it was. I think he looked at sales and that were next to multifamily homes and kind of, in his judgment, felt that they were exhibiting a full market value. But again, I haven't seen that report, so I don't know for sure. That opinion is stronger than some other evidence we've received. We always weight the evidence that we get based on how thorough and how appropriate the comparables are and all of that. So, in this case, I'd say that's better evidence than sometimes we get, but maybe it would have been better if we could have really seen it and evaluated it and even looked up a couple things ourselves and looked into it a bit more. But, that was an administrative thing. It wasn't the applicant's fault. But, that's, that's sort of the outcome of that situation.
I appreciate that.
So anyway.
We have had our house appraised many times over the years, refinancing, and comps were always difficult. It's a unique piece of property.
Yeah.
Given all of the.
That's
it's
a
on the
density.
water, it's a density that's at the end, all of that. So
Right.
Density in the downtown isn't always a detrimental thing,
No,
I guess.
No.
proximity downtown is
Right.
great.
Yeah.
So the two buildings that were cited in the report, I made a note as Mr. Lano was reading it, were 31 River Street, so help me out, Ms. Fisher.
Yes.
Which one is 31 is here?
You guys know.
Which one's 31? So 31 is one of the ones that was cited, and it does have multiple families next to it. And the other was 22,
Yep.
Mr. Wald's house, which is this one?
No, one next to it.
This one here, which does have the two-family, which he's been citing, but also has these right across the street. So each of the ones that was cited by the appraiser do have multiple families near, practically every house here, because of the nature of the neighborhood, either abuts or is within sight distance of a multifamily. It's not like we've got, groupings.
So in his defense, he chose very, very local comparables, which is
Yeah.
excellent. And it's almost impossible to isolate for one factor when you're trying to make these comparisons. So I think, he did a good job with the data available perhaps, but maybe it wasn't as exhaustive as you guys would like to see.
Can you drive down the street?
Yeah.
I'm sure he did. He's an ethical appraiser.
Would anyone, did you,
Well, this young lady would like to have her say.
well, hi,
Sir.
could you tell us your name, please?
Hi, my name is Sherry, and I live at 38 South Street.
Okay, Sherry.
I'm 9 years old, but I also have a very powerful voice. I don't really use that fenced off area a lot, but I usually see a lot of people take their dogs there to come play with them a lot. And me and Charlie also like to play in our backyard.
Is that Charlie next to you?
Charlie's right over there.
That's Charlie. Got it.
I like to walk my dogs in the street and ride my bike there too. So, if there's another house coming there might be more kids to play with, but there might be a little more traffic, which can be kind of hard for me to ride my bike around too. I want a place that me and my brother can play somewhere safe and have a good time there. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
It's lovely to hear from you.
That's wonderful to hear from you. Thank you. Love
I'll
it.
say a couple words, if that's all right.
Absolutely. You're going to follow that act.
Well, so Brandon Tetler, 31 River Street. I'm directly abutting the new project. I'm
So yours is the little,
31 River, the yellow
Yep,
one
got it.
directly next to it.
how do you spell your last name, Brandon?
Tetler, Tetler.
Thank you.
I'm very scared of public speaking, but after she just killed it, I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, I
Yeah.
can't say no now.
Yeah.
So a couple things. I think that off the bat, the valuation of the properties, I think we can all agree is somewhat speculative. It's obviously a very small sample that the appraiser was going off of. And I think in the case with any kind of property decision, if valuation, appreciation, depreciation is speculative, we should lean towards conservative, which is depreciation for all the multiple stakeholders that are currently involved, especially including myself and the amount of frontage I have actually abutting these two properties. This project, in my opinion, and a gentleman earlier had hit it perfectly on the head of the nail, would have changed my opinion on purchasing this house 2 years ago. My wife and I moved to Exeter in 2021. We lived in a little apartment on South Street, so literally 400 feet away. And we made the decision to commit to a 30-year fixed rate mortgage right down the street because of the fact that we wanted to get away from the congestion that caused by the townhouses on Franklin Street and the multiple multifamilies abutting us to the left side as well. it's just not in character with the neighborhood. We moved away for the quiet and peace, for the single-family homes and the tenants that live to our abut us as well. They're very professional, keep to themselves. The traffic congestion this would cause is, again, would retrospectively affect our decision to actually move to this area. One of my other concerns as well is parking, and I'm sorry I didn't review the specific plans, but I believe each townhouse is going to have 2 spaces, one in the driveway, one in the garage.
Correct.
Similar to the houses on Franklin Street.
I believe so, yes.
Yeah, so having lived directly behind those blue townhouses on Franklin Street, I think the reality is that those 2 spots that are technically zoned for it aren't reality in the summer when there's no parking ordinance. My house right around the corner would have all their second cars parked right around it, just like it was a parade going on downtown. I think that in reality, people aren't going to box their car in their garage and with one in the driveway. Again, I'm not sure if that was the exact plan. I didn't review it. But I think that's another concern that really has to be met. Otherwise, we'll have an already tight road with scary high congestion made much worse by cars in the road.
So can I just clarify what you said? You're saying that people with a garage and a driveway space don't want to park in tandem, so they park one car out in the street?
Correct.
Okay.
Otherwise,
I just want to make sure I understood what you were.
Yeah, sorry, I'm not.
No, that's okay. You're good.
And again, I'm not sure if that's the exact plans, but if those are, reality shows the Franklin Street houses that that's not what people do. So,
okay.
That's all I had. Thank you.
Thank you.
Could I offer just a quick follow-on? I'll be very brief.
Okay.
I just wanted to follow up and say that one of the reasons that we chose that location was because it was our perhaps naive sense that because Phillips Exeter owned the property and it wasn't therefore going to be developed by a developer, that it was less likely to result in something like this. And one of the things that we have liked about Exeter, we've been here for a number of years, lived in the Mill for a while, but have lived in various places around the country and a lot of places in and around this area, including Kittery Point, and watched what happened with Portsmouth. And I think everyone who's been in and around Portsmouth, if they had it to do over again, would make a lot of different choices. And one of them is they wouldn't build on every square inch of the city. And one of the things that I've liked about Exeter is the sense that Phillips Exeter provides us with a nice buffer against overdevelopment. And it would be, in my opinion, a shame to see Phillips Exeter become what is in essence a real estate developer in terms of its disregard for its neighbors and for the density of the area where it's building.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
I guess I want.
Not necessarily.
That's true too. Sherry may take it over again. And she wrote that herself sitting right there.
My name is Bonnie Linscott. I live on Bow Street, but I butt the property to the Phillips Exeter Academy via Court Street. I'm here.
Could you explain what you just said again?
I live on Bow Street.
But
I butt the PEA through the Court Street property, my Court Street property.
You abut through. Were you the owner of this property?
This sort of, yes. It was in the family, yes.
Okay.
So my family.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I thought your name was familiar. Okay.
Yes,
Please
that
go
is
ahead.
correct. So Victoria had the property when it was listed as 3537, which made it a duplex, just one duplex on River Street. I'm pleased that the Browns Court section now has just a duplex itself. I would, however, like to see a change in their plans to change the housing so that it would have a mirror effect, so their driveways would be on the opposite sides of the housing, and move that double section on Browns into the middle so they can create their own third section of parking. So it would be 2 as a driveway and 1 as an interior in the garage. Like the gentleman was saying for Franklin Street, no, they don't use the in front of each other parking because he has maybe one has to leave before the other, so they don't like to change their vehicles around, so they just leave one on the street. And with Franklin, it just turns into double parking on each side, makes it hard to get through. But I digress because we're not talking about Franklin
Right.
Street at this time. We're talking about River Street. So if, like I had suggested the last time, put a duplex on River and a duplex on Brown. That would be a great compromise. But also, with doing just the one set on each, create your own parking for those items so that they're not parking on that street. And that would be to flip the housing so that your driveways are on the outside of the structure, not the inside, or both on the right or the left, etc. And then you can create your own, like an apron parking off to the side itself. So you could create your own 3-section parking. That would be for them. That would alleviate anything for the people on River Street that would have to put up with the extra vehicles, because kids grow up. Once they get their driver's license, they're going to start wanting their own vehicles, which means added vehicles to that area. Also, with that turnaround that they're proposing or suggesting, the only problem with the turnaround is the fear that it becomes a spare parking spot. So, and I don't care how many times you can post a no parking in this section, it doesn't get followed. And they'll just all of a sudden or automatically vehicles will start showing up there and becoming a habit. And that's not fair, not at all. And, oh gosh, I put all kinds of notes on here. You think I could follow it up now? Ooh, so the parking was already there. I think that about says it all there, because Sherry got in a good spot. So that 35 and 37, what they're proposing, so one double set and one double set, so there'd be 2 double sets. So it would be a 35AB and a 37AB. We don't know.
It doesn't really matter.
Exactly.
It really doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter, okay, but suggested fairities would be, like I had said or stressed in the last meeting that we had, fair, a duplex on each side, a duplex on Browns, a duplex on River, because we know you're going to put something there, we know they want to, and they have the right to. But at least accommodate for all this other, all the other tight section that's going on through there.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You may not be last.
I may not be. Sherry might be coming back up.
I have another thing to say. On behalf of the pets and the kids.
All right. Well, okay, Sherry, one more thing.
I have 2 puppies named Milo and Scout, and they've ran away before. I was so scared that the busy streets would mean they'd never come back. There's a lot of other dogs on our street, and if there's more traffic, that means if dogs run away, they're most likely not to come back. And for kids, like my little brother, he sometimes just wanders off. I don't know what I'd do without him. So that's on behalf of the pets, kids, and myself.
Okay.
Thank you.
Better keep an eye on both. Would anyone else? Going once? Thanks, Sherry.
You're welcome.
All right. You're going to follow that?
I'm thrilled with the opportunity to rebut a cute 9-year-old. That's great.
All right.
Very nicely done. So it was mentioned briefly that we have rights to do something here. That's Simplex Technologies versus Newington, that we have a right to a reasonable use of our property. That's baked into New Hampshire law. And I think the chair summed it up pretty well, and basically that, yeah, we understand that abutters would probably prefer this remain the stand of trees or whatever is there now. But it's an empty lot doesn't always stay empty. And the reality is that we have a need at the school to increase faculty housing to continue providing the best faculty and being a great prep school. And the comments about sort of be reasonable, fit the neighborhood, we lopped off 25% of the previous project, which is, again, okay, it's only 2 units, but if 25% and in most housing development type situations, that's a substantial piece here. And then To the idea, which I know the board doesn't believe, that the academy comes in here and tells the town what's going to happen, I would cite last month where we came in and thought we had a good plan and tried to present it well, and it gained no traction, and that was fair. So we came back hat in hand here, 25% reduction, tried to do something in the R2 zone that is allowed by special exception, tried to be compliant with the ordinance, and that's what we've done here. So yes, I understand that neighbors don't want this in their backyard, but we still have rights to use our property. We have a need to do this. It is going to be a first-class development. There's nothing in the ordinance that requires duplexes to be the same size as other duplexes previously existing on the street, et cetera. Zoning ordinances, you've got a full binder in front of you. There's a lot of rules in there, and we've complied with them on this one. We don't have the situation where we have to comply with something that's just not written down, that unfortunately the neighbors would prefer. Again, a little bit sorry that people would prefer this to remain vacant. The reality here is we need to do something with this, and the law gives us a right to do so. Otherwise, we risk the taking analogies here. Also, we've already, as one of the criterion, suggested that we will go to planning board. Many of these comments were planning board issues. We provided an expert appraisal report and were countered by a significant amount of lay testimony about specious ideas about how this is somehow going to harm them, when the comps that we've all seen is that new builds are a good comparable in towns, coupled with we weren't required to be here in front of you with ITE handbook testimony about traffic. But again, units of this size, residential tends to have a relatively de minimis impact on these things, all of which, and I'm not a traffic engineer either, but all of these things will be vetted out, possibly peer reviewed, et cetera, at planning board. So we are doing everything we can within reason to get what the school needs, while also being mindful of what we heard last month and complying with what exists in the neighborhood, as is evidenced here by the fact that you see the red multifamily, you see the fact that these houses are next to these rather tightly compacted purple zones here. We're not trying to put duplexes into a lot where it's all 10-acre lots somehow in a planned community. This is how development happens in neighborhoods, and we didn't, build at the same time as everybody else. This is basically a modern proposal that works well, fits with the neighborhood, but is, again, a little bit different than what is there, and that's how development and evolution of neighborhoods is. And again, I'd reiterate, I think we provided credible evidence, and I think we met each of the criteria and should receive this special exception. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Leno before we close the public session, move to deliberations? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. So, I want to mention, especially given the number of people from the public who are here, that how this works is that this use is permitted by special exception. Residential use, multifamily residential use is permitted by special exception in this zone. And we have a series of criteria, special exception criteria, that are laid out by state law. A through J, I and J do not apply in this, so it's A through H. And we will go through each of them and discuss them in light of your comments and in light of the application that's before us. And then we'll make our decision, and we're going to do that right now. So, would somebody like to volunteer to walk us through the criteria, or would somebody else like to make an opening statement? Is there anything?
Well, the first criteria is it permitted by special exception? And the use is, but I wouldn't mind a little discussion on how it applies to a lot such as the Academy's lot, which is developed with multiple uses. And I guess I think the criteria for the neighborhood is, more of a small-scale residential, and how does this apply to this larger lot? And how was that decision made?
Well, they're required to have minimum of 24,000 square feet versus the 15,000 square feet for a single family
Per what? 24,000 square feet
of lot area.
of lot area, okay.
That was presented to me. I don't know, I don't remember the number. They have the number, but it certainly exceeds the 75,000 square feet of lot area that it would be required.
On the overall parcel.
Can I ask?
Okay.
That's the clarifying question.
Yeah,
So are we
here we go.
looking at the overall parcel or are we looking just at what, that
We're looking at the whole
3.3,
parcel.
the whole parcel? Okay, so that's what we
Well,
have to,
Yeah, I mean, we're not looking at just that one. They're merging
That one lot.
that one lot with the other lot.
Okay.
Providing that area, and like I said, I don't remember, but it exceeded the 75,000 square feet of lot area. I'm sorry, it wasn't 75, it would be 3 times 24,000, whatever that comes to.
72.
72,000.
Thank you. It certainly has the lot area.
So just as a clarification, especially for members of the audience, the lot is not just the small lot that was purchased from the Linscott estate. The lot will be merged, and there is no lawful reason to prevent the Academy from merging two pieces of property that they own. And the small piece of property, which is called 3537, that Ms. Linscott was referring to, is going to be merged into the larger one. With the variance discussion last month, much was made of the fact that we have neighborhood and we have lot. And so there's a big difference between the two. There's an impact on the neighborhood. Now, the neighborhood for the lot is 50-something acres that extends across half of the town. But the neighborhood for some of the other criteria is more localized. When we talk about the permitted as a special exception, then that is definitely allowed to have multiple buildings on a 50-acre, I'm approximating, I think it was 52, something like that, 50-ish acre lot that this will become. The impact is more local. The impact is River Street and Browns Court and River Street Extension, and we understand that and we'll get there. But as far as this criteria is concerned, this use is allowed because they are merging 3537 and the rest of the property that extends all the way out to Court Street somewhere. Right. Okay? So did you want to keep going with the criteria since you started with A?
Well, I can't find my binder or any of that stuff. So
Here you go.
Would you like that?
you're not going to let me off the hook for that reason.
No,
okay?
no.
Okay, so
So yes, it is, so A, yes, it is a special exception that is allowed in this zone.
Yes, sir.
yes, so criteria A has been thoroughly discussed. So B, that the use is so designed, located, and proposed to be operated that the public health, safety, welfare, and convenience will be protected. I think there's significant concern within the neighborhood that there will be congestion and convenience and potentially even safety might be affected. The town of Exeter is an older town, and it has the lack of planning in terms of its street layout that older towns have. And I think that there's reason for these concerns, but I also think that there's plenty of examples where, smaller streets without big sidewalks and big turnarounds are fully developed. I don't want to be the arbiter of whether or not this criteria has been met, but there's reason for disagreement within the neighborhood. But to me, it seems like we can't prevent people from using their property, and that it's the town's responsibility to maintain the streets. And
But I'd like to play devil's advocate a little bit on that one.
and that's good. I want.
So the point was well taken, the fact that, yes, we've reduced by 25% the building, but there are still 4 driveways on River Street.
I agree.
And, if you take into consideration, so there's additional criteria in this, barriers, which is the fact that these are dead-end streets as well. So it's they compared it to the street where the other condos are. Well, that's a through street. These are dead-end streets, so not only do we have potentially cars parked, on the street, but now you have other cars having to turn around because they've gotten into a dead-end street. And I do think that there is an opportunity to use this property if these units were set up differently, that you wouldn't have to be going out onto the street, that you could be going through the property in order to get to your driveway and get so that you're not out on the street and putting more cars out on the street, impacting safety, impacting convenience.
I'm not arguing that point. And, the idea that it's moving by itself. The idea that
me and my foot, sorry.
that you could potentially create some kind of connected traffic pattern between Browns Court and River Street occurred to me. I think that there's pluses and minuses to be debated about that, because then you know.
Increase in impervious surface.
Well, increase impervious surfaces, and you create the less single-family feeling type of development. And then, probably going to have a lot of people driving on private property because they don't want to turn around. And so, there's a lot of problems either way, I guess. And I don't know that it's our place to really resolve that at this board. So I don't, I don't feel completely comfortable either way with the options. And I'm not suggesting I should sway everybody's opinion, but I can see the merit to, and we have actually, had other proposals in other parts of town, maybe where somebody's developing new housing now, where something else was going to be there that created more traffic, and it didn't end up getting approved and didn't happen. So we've got examples of both sides of this.
Okay.
It's an opinion thing at this point. So,
I have a comment on the safety. One is, if you look at this map up here on Clifford Street, a lot of cars, mostly out of state, will turn left onto Water Street. And I was told that the solution is to contact Google, because that's, if you watch, most of the cars actually have out-of-town plates and they're not familiar with the area. So that's point one. The other one is, I know this area, Franklin Street, very well. I think that this is a real problem in terms of how it's set up. As nowhere, if you look at Franklin Street, the red building, the building number 10 and 11, they were designed so that no one could park in front of those buildings, as well as the other 7 condos. So it pushes all the parking, up north. And I think it's imperative that needs to be resolved before the actual, and I'm not sure this is the place to do it, but it certainly needs to be resolved, because I think the points made by several of the owners of the properties have a very, very valid point.
Okay.
So I think I would like to move on to point C. I
think we're unresolved on B.
Yes. I think we are unresolved. And even, within myself, I feel unresolved on point B.
There's insecurity there.
So, C, that the proposed use will be compatible with the zone, district, and adjoining post-1972 development where it is to be located. Adjoining principal uses in existence prior to 1972, generally referred to as grandfathered uses, that are not permitted uses as listed in Schedule 4.2, Schedule 1, permitted use shall not be construed in determining the compatibility of an applicant's proposed use. And just to note, I don't think it was made clear enough in the discussion earlier from the applicant that most of the buildings in this neighborhood are pre-1972, so they don't really fit into this post-1972 development criteria that well. So, I think the use is compatible as a duplex. There's certainly plenty of duplexes in the neighborhood, and a good mix of housing, to be honest with you. So I don't see this as a roadblock for this this application. Anybody else want to comment?
No, I agree.
Okay. That adequate landscaping and screening are provided as required herein, and I believe there will be adequate landscaping and screening. I don't know what we could require or ask for it's just not already likely to be present in any proposed development. So, go ahead.
I guess this criteria is confusing to me because it seems like we're always deferring to planning, that, this will be covered in planning, but yet it's a criteria, but there was nothing presented about the landscaping. So how can we say it's addressed when we haven't seen anything?
Many of the things that we're asked to consider when granting a variance or a special exception, a lot of times the applicant's attorney will tell us that it's not our purview because it's going to go to planning. And, with all due respect, we're required to consider, traffic and safety and compatibility and all these things. So, yes, we do need to consider them. We might not need to get down to very close detail. But, there's no criteria for the other homes in this neighborhood right now. They're allowed to landscape their properties as they wish. This is not a change, a different type of use. It's still a residential, small-scale residential use. And I don't believe that the Academy is going to, do something objectionable here. I don't see a need for, what we do sometimes request is, would the applicant be willing to do fencing? Would the applicant be willing to do screening? And I don't see that as appropriate request for us to make in this case.
Because they are going to planning.
Well, because they're going to planning, and because they're the same, yeah.
It's in a residential zone.
Exactly. They're not.
Okay. All right.
They're not doing anything different.
That helps. That helps
It's a
clarify.
residential use in a residential zone.
Okay. Thank you.
The screening, the landscaping and screening that are appropriate here are that which would be, one would expect from a residential zone, which would be bushes and grass and
Thank you.
trees.
Yeah, we're not gonna-
Trees as appropriate.
Thank you.
We're not going to require them to do a hedge of arborvitaes
Right.
and build a berm and put a fence up. That's just not necessary in this location and application. So, where are they? E, that adequate off-street parking and loading is provided and ingress and egress is so designated as to cause minimum interference with traffic on abutting streets. This one's a little bit of a tough one. It's not the applicant's fault that it's a tough one, but it is still a tough one because it's difficult to envision increased, especially when there's snow on the ground and piled up on the sides of the street, that there is adequate off-street parking and ingress and egress right now.
Actually, I think it is quite clear. Adequate off-street parking and loading are provided, and they are providing adequate off-street parking. Loading is not an issue. It's adequate off-street parking. The law says that you must have one parking space per residential unit.
They absolutely have adequate
And
parking.
they have adequate off-street parking. And ingress and egress are so designed as to cause minimum interference with traffic. It's very limiting.
Oh, you're
More
right.
limiting than I would like it to be, but it's very limiting. The ingress and egress are not going to cause interference with traffic on abutting streets. Therefore, they do meet criteria E. This has to do with curb cuts and pulling into traffic on busy streets. These are not busy streets.
Right.
And they're not going to be made tremendously more busy. Yes, there's going to be more traffic. Absolutely. Absolutely. And during the winter, when there is no on-street parking, there's going to be two cars, and one's going to be in the driveway and one's going to be in the garage. Right?
Yes,
Because in the
no, you're
winter-
right. I read that incorrectly about the parking.
Right.
I agree with you completely on
E,
that.
unfortunately, is very prescribed. Fortunately or unfortunately, it is. It's very prescribed, and they do meet the criteria.
Okay. I do have the concerns about loading, but I agree it's not a heavily trafficked street and that can be addressed.
Yes.
The same way it would be.
More delivery vehicles, yes.
Well, and it's the same as it would be on any inner.
Right, right.
Intertown street.
A truck delivering to the end, an Amazon truck delivering to the end of either Brown's Court or, they face the same problems that they do right now. Somebody delivering to the houses at either end are going to have to either turn around in a driveway or back out, just as they're going to in the future.
Okay, so F, that the use conforms with all applicable regulations governing the district where located, except as may otherwise be determined for large-scale developments. This use does conform with the regulations governing the district, and there's no other large-scale development that I'm aware of that affects this proposal, so.
And this is not considered a large-scale development.
No. No. And then G, as a condition of special exception approval, the applicant may be required to obtain town planner review and/or planning board approval of the site plan, which the applicant has acknowledged they will do. Additionally, the Board of Adjustment may require the applicant to obtain planning board approval of the site plan prior to rendering a decision on an application for special exception. I don't foresee that is necessary for this application. So.
May I ask a question?
Sure.
We've never done this before in my 15-plus years on this board. But there is always the possibility of going to planning and saying that you must get site plan approval prior to our rendering an exception, rendering a decision.
Really?
Yeah.
You do that?
It's never been done.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it would have been nice for a Riverwoods scale application to be able to have invoked this, but I don't necessarily see it as appropriate for this, but do you
Planning board
see a
would not-
role for it?
I do, and this is a question that perhaps for staff, but one of the things the planning board is going to have to do is have a technical review. Are they going to be required to have technical review for this, Mr. Eastman? Fire?
Yeah, oh, yeah. Yeah.
So they are going to have
Part of
to.
technical.
It's not my decision,
Whose decision is it?
town planner.
Okay.
And
It's not like we got to run a ladder truck down there as we would have to for a dorm.
town engineer.
Right.
I'm not so sure we talked about that, but or you have some
Well, we really can't hear from them unless we make a vote to allow them to speak, so right now. Because we've closed.
Fear sometimes would be if the planning board says, oh yeah, this is different, yeah, okay, we'll do it. And then, but they're not aware of all the ZBA, all the criteria. They're not following that because it's not their jurisdiction. So that's why I think it's never happened.
Well, and it's also a burden on the applicant to, come to us and then go to them and then come back,
Yeah. This is more of a straightforward process.
Given the number of concurrent construction and development projects that the Academy has undergoing at any given time, I wouldn't consider, with an individual developer saying you must go to planning and come back, yes, you're adding months to the decision-making process. I wouldn't consider that necessarily a burden, as much of a burden in this case. It might be. Maybe the need is, to get the construction going as soon as possible, but. Okay, I'm not going to dig any further into that one.
Okay, and then letter H, that the use shall not adversely affect abutting or nearby property values. And there is evidence presented. I know it's maybe wasn't as well vetted or people didn't have enough time to look at it as much as they would have liked, and it may not meet everybody's desires for what the extent of the evidence was, but it's better than we usually get. And I have to say, as an appraiser that works in an agency that brings change to people's property, nobody likes change, but I agree with the appraiser's conclusion, if not his, I'm not certain of his methodology entirely, but I agree with his conclusion that it's unlikely to diminish property values. The things that typically diminish property values are, pretty adverse things like, highway noise or odors and noise and fumes and that kind of thing. I know that's not what people want to hear, but that's my professional opinion on that this is unlikely to reduce property values.
Because
I'm sure
it is a continuation of a residential use in a residential zone?
Yes, and it's new investment in the neighborhood, which, generally speaking, unless it's very poorly done, typically, doesn't diminish
not
property
negative.
values. Yeah.
Also, wouldn't they wouldn't really be able to, if they were appraising the properties on the other side of the street, for instance, the homes, they wouldn't be able to give them additional credit for having a park across the street, right? Which you have seen instances where you get a value from having a park or you get a value from having conservation land. But you have a developable parcel, so it's anticipated in valuation.
People like to talk about that. I have not, I've done these types of studies. I've done this stuff a lot. And I have not seen, it has to be like a quarry with explosions or, there's not unless we're in a really down market where it's very hard to move property, it's not likely to have any kind of negative impact unless it's pretty objectionable use. And, I've done studies where I've looked at houses that run up against, their backyard is I-93. And then even one block over, those homes are affected a little bit, but even one block over, the effect is diminished. And it has to be pretty immediate and it has to be pretty strong, is my conclusion from many, many times of doing impact studies on different aspects of what could impact value.
Yeah.
So
I think what I'm saying is that they couldn't give them credit on value because there was a developable parcel across the street when that could easily be developed, right?
we hear that all the time on this board, that, that people didn't they liked having an empty lot across the street.
Yeah, that's what I'm
And
saying.
it's not their property.
Yeah, no, we're on the same, it's the same exact thing.
You're
Yeah.
approaching it
Same
from
thing.
different directions.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So, and in terms of value, unless it's a change in use or an objectionable use, it doesn't seem to have any impact, because there's just such a housing shortage, and this is a very desirable neighborhood, and I don't think it's going to be, I don't think the values are going to be diminished by this. I'm sorry, I just, that's my opinion.
Laura, can we circle back to B, please?
Yes, we can.
It's the only one where we have a question mark. I believe it meets all the other criteria pretty clearly. B is where we still have a question mark. That the use is so designed, located, and proposed to be operated that the public health, safety, welfare, and convenience will be protected. Where do we have questions here? We got 4 parts: health, safety, welfare, and convenience. I don't think health is much of an issue.
I think safety and potentially convenience are the...
So let's dig into that a little bit. What are our concerns?
I mean, health and welfare are obviously connected to safety, so it's hard to separate them, but yeah.
I know.
All right, let's talk about safety as the real one.
Safety is where your concern is, in other words.
I do feel some concern about the safety.
So the safety would be as a result of putting 4 additional driveways with attendant traffic onto River Street and 2 additional driveways with attendant traffic onto Browns Court, and the impact that the traffic will have.
And the additional cars parking on the street, even if they're not, it's not required. I mean, they are meeting their parking requirement, absolutely.
They are meeting their parking requirements.
And then the snow storage, and that is going to be discussed at planning board, and maybe that's what we end up, concluding, is that we can trust the planning board to do that.
The turnaround thing is kind of a bit of a throwaway. I don't know if that's really going to be effective or not.
Well, the neighbor's comment is
It'll turn into a parking space.
It'll turn into a parking space,
Right.
probably.
It will.
I mean, people are going to want to go to the tennis courts or somewhere else, and they're going to end up parking there, if not neighbors, so.
The town perhaps should address signage at the entrance to both Browns Court and to River Street. There are dead-end signs, but, they're easy to overlook. I don't know. Signage can make a difference, but that's outside the purview of this board. Public health, safety, welfare, and convenience will be protected. We do have a responsibility to the citizens and taxpayers of Exeter to make sure that this application does protect their public health, safety, welfare, and convenience. Does anybody else want to weigh in on this?
I think we have an existing situation that.
But thank you.
I think we have an existing situation that is, constrained and is the cause for concern that it will become more constrained. But it's not a new situation. The road is narrow. It's, picture emergency vehicles in there, and, you become concerned pretty quickly. But it's mostly an existing situation. But this would, the 4 driveways, I don't love it. I have to be honest. Whether the idea of mirror images and spacing them out differently, or some kind of on-site parking at the end or somewhere else might alleviate some of that. I don't know. It's, but I do have concerns about the way the 4 driveways line up right there at the end of that dead-end street.
Mm-hmm.
They do have a right to build here, and I'm not trying to infringe on that. I just am trying to be fair to all parties. And I don't think that the abutters' concerns are frivolous at all.
Agreed.
Could there be direct talks between the 2 parties, and maybe they can resolve this issue?
Well, there's opportunity for changing the site plan at the planning process. We are approving the use.
Right.
We're also, in this case, approving the density.
Yes.
We are not approving the specific construction plan. They don't have to exactly meet. They can't change the setbacks, they can't go over the height, things like that, but they don't have to make them look exactly like that plan. But we are approving this. Or not approving it. Would anyone else like to weigh in on public health, safety, welfare, and convenience? Any other thoughts on that? Hearing none, I would accept a motion.
No?
I'm not supposed to make motions.
No, I know, I'm thinking. All right, before that, I would like to discuss the possibility of granting the special exception, but with a note to the planning board that we have concerns about access and safety, and can they pay particular attention to that in
I
their
believe
process?
that is something that you can absolutely attach to make part of a motion.
Anybody else have any thoughts before we?
If we're going to attach it to the motion, I think it needs to be very clear, like what our concerns are with respect to safety and convenience. And it is those two things. Because just saying, oh, well, we're concerned about safety, can you address that? It doesn't really capture the concerns that were presented by the public. Theirs were very specific about parking, traffic flow, snow storage.
Just visibility.
Yeah.
You know, visibility is tough.
Yeah.
When the street is that narrow.
I'll give you an example is, with more people there, you're going to have cars on both sides of the street. Not to say that doesn't happen, but you're also going to have more kids, and therefore more targets that cars won't have visibility on.
It is also possible that the motion could be to deny the application, which would in this case perhaps encourage the applicant to reconsider the number of units. Now, 6 is, yes, 25% less than was proposed last time, but it is still a lot. It's not a lot on 52 acres, but it is a lot when you look at the impact that those 6 units will have on Browns Court and on River Street. If your concerns about safety, convenience are deep enough, that could be cause for denying the application, or at least making a motion to deny the application, which might be seconded or not, which might be discussed, which might be approved. There's still some distance in there.
I don't think we necessarily need to be prescriptive to the applicant as far as you need to reduce the number of units.
No, we're not allowed to do that.
Right, but I think it's more, how do you adjust the placement of units, whatever the number may be, to better address the safety and convenience part of the criteria. Because I personally don't think it meets, the application meets the criteria, that criteria. That's the only reason.
So we can entertain a motion to approve or entertain a motion to deny. My inclination is to, because I feel our primary task here is related to the use, that the special exception is permitted in this zone, but the special exception gives us the opportunity to weigh in on it, which is what we're trying to do here. We're doing our jobs. So my feeling is that we could discuss an motion to approve the application with a note to the planning board that we have concerns about safety related to access, visibility, emergency access, and it has to do with the driveway placement, primarily. That's what's generating our concerns. So there is still plenty of opportunity to improve that situation, and for the planning board, who it is their greater purview to discuss these more detailed matters, to weigh in.
It is also possible that the applicant may take to heart the conversation that's taking place here and find a solution prior to going to planning board that allows the same number of units, but perhaps 2 buildings with 3 each or something, dividing things up, finding a different way. 4 driveways dumping onto River Street is a lot. There's no doubt about that. It's dumping onto River Street in the course of a fairly, I don't exactly know what the distance is, but 120-ish feet, 130-ish feet. There's going to be 4 driveways. Even for the 4 families that end up living in those homes, that's a lot, right together there.
Yep. And I was going to say as my example that the condos that were developed on Franklin Street, but the neighbor is correct. That is a through street. This is not a through street.
This is not a through street.
And it is a little different.
Right, right. And there isn't really even much room in between the driveways to park a car. Frankly, I don't think there's a great deal of distance between them. It's hard to tell. That number is not, if it's called out, it's so small I can't see it. There's a lot packed in there on River Street. There's no doubt about that.
It's a great location. I don't think it's wrong to want to develop it with, several units of housing.
Yep.
I just think there are legitimate concerns about how it's going to work from the accessibility point of view, from my perspective.
And if those concerns are sufficient in your mind, then that should be reflected in your motion.
Well, I'm going to make a motion, and we can discuss it, and we can vote it down or amend it as people want, just to keep this process moving forward.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Ms. Davis.
So I move that we accept the application for a special exception at 35 to 37 River Street, tax map 72, lot 99, in the R2 Single Family District, as presented, with a request that the planning board review this application that will be going for site plan review, with particular attention paid to safety as it applies to access, visibility, emergency access, all related to driveway placement.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion. Hearing none, I'll call the vote. All those in favor of the motion to approve the application for a special exception with the proviso that the planning board pay particular attention to public health, safety, welfare, and convenience. All those in favor of the motion to approve indicate by saying aye.
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 Chair votes aye. It's approved.
Minutes. Did you give them to Bob? I think you gave them to Bob.
I gave them to, I didn't even have a chance to look at them.
So, approval of minutes of the March 17th meeting. Only 3 of us were part of that. No. 1, 2, 3.
He was here.
You were here, so 4. Did anybody have any questions about the minutes? Did you have a chance to look at them?
I didn't even have a chance to look at them.
I skimmed.
And
I didn't see anything.
I skimmed as well. Did you even look at them?
I didn't get to look at them, no.
I think we'll put off the minutes, approving the minutes until next month.
That's okay.
Yeah, I think it's fine because that was supplanted by this application anyway. All right, so we're going to defer the approval of the March 17th meeting minutes until next month. Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Moved, seconded?
Me. Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
We're still in session. Approved and all in favor?
Aye.
We're out of here, kids.
Okay, I'm sorry, sir, but.
Sorry.
What
was the question?
Thank you for tuning in to Exeter TV. Exeter TV is the town's public and government access channels, available on Comcast channels 6 and 22. Channel 6 is your channel. If you have an idea for a program, want to host your own talk show, or submit a film, we're here to get your content on television. On Channel 22, we bring you live and replay coverage of government meetings and other town updates. A third channel, Blue Hawk Media, is operated by SAU 16 and can be found on Channel 8, with all your school sports, events, and meetings. You can watch Exeter TV online at exeternh.tv, Apple TV, and on Roku. Find us on social media for extra content. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell to get notified about live streams and new content. Tune in to our platforms every other Friday to watch the Exeter Biweekly Report, with recaps of recent events, updates from town departments, and messages from nonprofits in your area. If you head to our website, exeternh.tv, we invite you to sign up to our newsletter to receive monthly updates about new content, upcoming meetings, and more. We'd like to thank you for taking the time to watch Exeter TV.